Good morning. My name is Dr. Timothy Peter. I'm professor of music and director of choral activities in the School of Music at Stetson University. On behalf of this community and within this community, for scholars, teachers, learners, and sharers of joy and celebration, welcome to Values Day Opening Session 2016, and special welcome to our guests who have traveled from Kenya to celebrate with us the joy of community, as many voices make one Stetson. This morning you will hear a piece of music to open our session, not as a performance, but as an invitation for you to open your minds and spirits and recognize all that we at Stetson University can contribute in the global message of understanding that many voices make one spirit across our country and beyond. The piece of music you'll hear is a Kenyan folk song. It's entitled Wana Baraka and sung in Swahili, expressing joy in coming together and spontaneous improvisation in building community through the celebration of many voices, and especially in honor of our guest, Dr. Peter Nyong'o and Mrs. Nyong'o, as we will be singing, "We have blessings, we have peace, we have joy, and we all have our well-being," as we celebrate Alleluia.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. I am Dr. Christopher Bell, Assistant Professor of Religious Studies here at Stetson. I am also the Chair of the Values Commitment Steering Team. Today, we celebrate the values that make Stetson University exceptional. The three pillars of our values, personal growth, intellectual development, and global citizenship, will be explored in some fashion or another in all of the workshops and events we have scheduled for today. Among our students, faculty, staff, and community members here at Stetson, we promote personal growth that we may continue to challenge ourselves on the journey to greater self-knowledge. We promote intellectual development that we may constantly foster a spirit of exploration and integrity and engage our minds fully, no matter the endeavor. And we promote global citizenship, that we may be active, informed, and responsible participants in local communities as well as throughout the world. While Values Day means many things to many people, to me, it is an opportunity to reflect on and reaffirm our commitment to ourselves and to our fellow Hatters as lifelong learners. The great Chinese sage Confucius, I teach Asian religions here, so I have to quote Confucius. He said of himself, quote, "At 15, my heart was committed to learning. At 30, I stood firm. At 40, I had no more doubts. At 50, I knew the divine will. At 60, I was attuned to what I heard. And at 70, I could follow my heart's desire without transgressing the norm." Now, he was a lifelong learner. That's hard to match, I know. But what this brief autobiographical reflection shows us is that, in truth, none of us stop learning throughout our lives. Even outside of scheduled classes, there is ample opportunity to engage with diverse perspectives, backgrounds, and cultures, and to be reminded of the values we share and the ideals for which we strive. And that is what today's events are all about. We have a wonderful program this Values Day, which I will summarize shortly. But before I do, I would like to thank the members of the Values Day Planning Committee, without whom today's activities would not have been possible. So when I call your name, please stand for much-deserved recognition, and if everyone could please hold your applause until I say. Savannah Jane Griffin. There you are. She deserves it. She is our lead coordinator, and I am especially grateful to her for all the incredible work she has done in making today happen. I am also grateful to Colleen Price. There you go. There she is. Paula Hintz. Sarah Coffey. There you are. Veronica Hernandez. Jesus Alfonso. Julie Hunter. Matthew Kurz, Giovanni Fernandez, Rajni Shankar Brown, Lindsay Graves, Luis Paredes, Jen Chen, Elizabeth Potter, Nathan Bodger, there you are, Amanda Hernandez, Amy Aman, Timothy Stiles, Jim Kroll, Amber Finicum Simmons, Luisa de Guzman, and of course our marketing team. These individuals, friends, colleagues, and students, all of them, have worked tirelessly since the spring semester to plan the events, coordinate meetings, consolidate ideas, reserve spaces, and contend with any number of other necessary but unsung responsibilities. So please join me in giving them a round of applause. Thank you all again. Also, remember when you all walked in and you were given a card with 3 wishes on it? You all got that, right? Okay. 1 for self, 1 for Stetson, and 1 for the world. Take a moment to fill in your wishes for these 3 items on the card, and when you exit today, hand them to the Green, White, and You members outside. They will then be hung up in the Palm Court and available for viewing throughout the week. This activity is meant to be reflective in nature in order to encourage both intellectual development and personal growth. And now for the program. As a quick announcement, I just found out we had over 100 students involved in our service projects this morning, so that's wonderful news. Yeah. Great job, everyone. So, at the conclusion of our much-anticipated keynote address, a community lunch will be provided from noon to 2 in the Commons. During the same time period, there will also be a global citizenship fair on the Stetson Green, where the first 500 attendees will receive a free Values Day t-shirt. Snazzy. For those who have done their homework and read Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's award-winning novel, Americana, there will be a Stetson Read session from 12:30 to 1:45 p.m. in the Stetson Room, where participants will discuss the book. Throughout the afternoon, from noon to 4, there will be a series of excellent exhibits at our own Homer and Dolly Hand Arts Center. From 2 to 3, we will have 4 different current event dialogues, all focusing on recent issues and crises at home and around the world. This special series is actually a new addition to Values Day, so we're very excited to see it in action. The other workshops and panels that are the focus of Values Day are divided into 2 blocks, the first being from 3:15 to 4:15, and the second from 4:30 to 5:30. And these will be taking place all over campus. You can check your booklet or the event website for the details. We will then host our 7th annual Stetson Hunger Banquet at the Hollis Center Rinker Fieldhouse from 4:30 to 6. And from 5:30 to 7, in the Stetson Room, there will be a special discussion entitled Native Values, Ancient Principles in a Global Context. Finally, from 7 to 8:30 tonight on the Stetson Green, join us in a tribute to honor the lives lost in the Pulse nightclub shooting. This event, entitled #KeepDancingStetson, hopes to celebrate their lives through music and dance. For the students, this means that there are 9 different cultural credit opportunities throughout the day. Yeah, I know that's what you're thinking. At the end of this opening, we will have 3 cultural credit stations outside of Elizabeth Hall, outside the main entrances, where you will be able to scan your student ID for this cultural credit session. You will also be able to scan for cultural credit at the end of each event in their respective locations, except for the 3 workshops. We will have a cultural credit table sponsored by the Honors Council set up in front of the Carlton Union Building from 3 to 7 today, and that's where you'll be able to receive cultural credit for the workshops. So as you can see, we have a full day ahead of us. I am sure we all cannot wait to see what it has to offer and what we can learn together. Now, may I present our president, Dr. Wendy Libby.
Good morning. Good morning. Today we are many voices, but we are one Stetson. And I must say, this is the first event in my over 7 years here that I've ever been to where part of the audience is wearing t-shirts and part are wearing tuxedos. It's very handsome up there. Thank you, and thank you for your voices. Of course, we've canceled classes today and assembled here so we can engage in collective exploration and reflection of our university's values. Values of personal growth, intellectual development, global engagement, and the taking of personal responsibility for how we behave, both individually and collectively. This was a tradition that began with my predecessor, Dr. Douglas Lee, and I'm proud that we have been able to continue and enhance it. So armed with your Values Day schedules and all of that stuff that Chris just told you, which completely went in one ear and out the other, that's why you have a printed schedule, I hope you will participate in as many events as possible and participate not just as a listener, but as an active participant. I'm pleased to introduce our special guest today, one who has traversed the Atlantic Ocean to be here, Professor and Senator Peter Nyong'o. He's also a member of the Hatter family, as his son Peter Jr. is a senior here, and you saw him singing for us. We're also very pleased that Junior's mom, Dorothy, could be here with us, as well as some of their friends, so welcome to all of you. And I must say that my highlight of the morning, my highlight thus far, was watching Dorothy Nyong'o going like this while her son was singing. It was a thing to behold. We had dinner last night with members of the Values Day Committee, and it was really a delightful evening. I want to thank all of you who were at our home for joining us. So, leaders, men and women who make a difference. This is the title of Professor Nyong'o's remarks, and we have the privilege today of seeing leadership through personal and global engagement lens. And he's going to share with us some of his experiences in Africa, particularly in Kenya and Uganda, what he has seen during his time in the United States, what he has gleaned from being an academic, and what he has learned from his time in politics. Professor Nyong'o graduated from Makerere University, Kampala in 1971, so I gather we're contemporaries, and he received a BA in political science and philosophy, and then went on to the University of Chicago, where he received his master's and PhD in political science. In 2013, he was the Grow Harlem Brundtland Senior Leadership Fellow in the Division of Policy Translation and Leadership Development at the Harvard School of Public Health. Throughout his career, he has been involved in the struggle against authoritarian rule in Kenya, and he was among the leaders who made a breakthrough into multi-party politics in 1992. In fact, in 1995, he was awarded the German African Award for his contribution to democracy and democratization in Africa. So he is currently a senator of Kisumu County, a member of the Senate Committee of Finance, Budget, and Commerce, and also the chair of the Senate Committee on Public Accounts and Investments for the country. Professor Nyong'o also spent a couple of years, beginning in 2003, as the Minister for Planning and National Development, and then in 2008 as the Minister for Medical Services. He teaches part-time at the University of Nairobi and has also taught at the El Colegio de Mexico and Addis Ababa University, and he was the head of programs at the African Academy of Sciences. He's published several books and articles on democracy, democratization, the state, and the political economy of development in Africa. So with a background like his, it should come as no surprise to us that he has some strong political opinions, even with respect to our own presidential election here in the United States. So please join me in welcoming Professor and Senator Peter Nyong'o.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. How are you, Hatters? Are you okay? Thank you so much. First of all, I'd really like to thank Stetson University for inviting Dorothy and I here this morning, today, to share with you the Values Day, together with our son, Peter. Last night, Wendy and Richard welcomed us in their lovely home, and we had good dinner, wonderful dinner with some of the people who have been organizing the Values Day this year. I also like to thank Amy Gibson and Savannah, who are in correspondence with me all the time, making arrangements to come here, and to Louise and Cecil, who drove us to the Tampa campus the other day, wonderful campus where we spoke yesterday before coming here. We thank you very, very much for making our life here and our visit here so comfortable and so memorable. Having said that, it's now about a year since I received the invitation from Stetson through the good office of President Libby, inviting me to come and speak on Values Day. And I noticed from the history of those who have spoken on Values Day, I'm actually standing in a place where I ought not to stand, because greater men and women have stood here to give speeches on Values Day. But having been thus honored, I'm delighted to be here this morning. When I decided to speak about leaders as men and women who make a difference on this Values Day, I thought it was in keeping with Stetson's tradition, because from this university must have graduated men and women who have made a difference in the lives of others. When I was at the Alliance High School in Kenya, during my teenage years as a student there, we used to be reminded that the school was preparing us to be leaders of tomorrow. There was no doubt that the school motto, "Strong to Serve," was meant to inspire durability, strength of character, purposefulness, and perhaps a sense of sacrifice among our students as we endured the rather Calvinist school culture and routine and a very Christian day-to-day life that saw us go to church twice a day, except on Saturdays. The school prayer appealed to the Almighty to have in its keeping that school, that its life may be joyful and its work fulfilling, and that from that school may go out men and women who, with its keeping and its guidance, would serve their fellows faithfully. The value of faith in God, confidence in ourselves, and selfless service for fellow human beings was instilled in us in prayer, in schoolwork, in sports, and on a daily routine. But we as students never believed that all of us would be leaders when we leave school. Yes, we would be strong, self-confident, and hopefully serve our fellows faithfully, but not all of us we thought would be leaders. It did not sound real. After all, even in school, we only had a few students who were leaders. Some were dormitory prefects, house prefects, choir leaders, as you saw here today, patrol leaders in scouting, house prefects, and so on, football captains. There are those who might have aspired to be leaders but never made it, even in school. This did not mean, however, that they did not have what it takes to rise to leadership. It could be argued that their time had not come as of then, or they just didn't have the opportunity to be leaders in school. I remember when our son Peter was expected to be a head boy in his final year at his school, at St. Andrew's School, Turi in Kenya. He actually never made it. He was, however, made the deputy head boy. We encouraged him, my wife and I, to regard that position that he received as a valuable recognition of his leadership qualities. When he then stayed at the school for his advanced level studies, that is junior college as you call it here, he was made head boy for 2 consecutive years, no doubt setting a record at that school. There is no doubt a moral to this story. That is, do not always expect to succeed in everything you set out to achieve. Sometimes failure may herald even better success in the future. The challenge is to keep on pushing on. Persistence and resoluteness are the essence of meaningful struggle in life. Indeed, when I was at Makerere University in Kampala, our university motto was Pro Futuro Edificanos, which means, I think, for the future we build, or we build for the future. In other words, the sacrifices today may produce results in the future because that is what we are all striving for. When we ourselves graduated from high school, notwithstanding the different roles we had played, we were all confronted with some very puzzling questions. What were we going to do out there in society? Having been given an education which, by its very nature, sets us out as a small elite charged with being leaders, who are we going to lead out there? And at what level of life? And if one ended up not being a leader, would that be the end of the world? These questions that puzzle us then still puzzle students, even today. I'm sure it's puzzling a lot of students at Stetson University. They also puzzle people out there in the wider society who enjoy being regarded as leaders but may not know what to do because of their limited notion of what leadership is all about. When we eventually left high school and went to various universities, quite a good number of Alliance High School's graduates played important leadership role in their colleges and universities. At Makerere University College in Kampala, which I've just mentioned earlier, in Uganda, I myself was elected the president of the Students' Guild, or the Students' Union, in my senior year. And I remember this morning we had breakfast with the student government, and my counterpart here was right there with me. James Orengo, who was 3 years my junior at the Alliance High School, was also later elected president of the Students' Union at the University of Nairobi in Kenya. It is not accidental that both of us later became part of the democratic reform movement in Kenya, ending up being elected to parliament and contributing substantially to the making of modern Kenya, together with some of our previous high school colleagues. James is now with me in the Senate and is chairman of a very important committee in that Senate, the implementation committee of all the bills and decisions made in the Senate. It is sometimes assumed that politicians or those who hold office in public life are the only people worth talking about as leaders. But leaders are to be found in various sectors of life, ranging from business to diplomacy, education, academia, religious institutions, social movements, sports, art, and culture. Thus, the late Muhammad Ali, a boxer of no mean repute, was an icon of a leader, celebrated in the United States of America and abroad. Wole Soyinka, the well-known Nigerian author and public figure, is a literary leader and a public intellectual in the same league as the late Professor Ali Mazrui of Kenya, who taught in this country for many years at Michigan University, as well as State University of New York at Binghamton. Miriam Makeba, Ransom Fela Kuti, and Manu Dibango are well known as musicians on the African continent and on the international stage. The ideas that come out from their music and their social commentaries have no doubt inspired many people and influenced social change. In a letter that he wrote to his two daughters, Barack Obama, your president, brought the attention of the girls to 13 Americans from all races who made tremendous contributions to society in their fields of endeavor as leaders. These include George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King Jr., Neil Armstrong, the Sitting Bull, Cesar Chavez, Maya Lin, Albert Einstein, George O'Keeffe, Jackie Robinson, Helen Keller, Jane Addams, and Billie Holiday, my most favorite singer of Lady Sings the Blues. Were President Obama to write that letter today, he would no doubt refer to Lupita Nyong'o, who recently lifted the lid for black, colored, and minority youths who aspire to be something in life, reminding them that all their dreams are valid. A leader, therefore, is one who inspires, shows the way, charts a new path, influences social action, and positively impacts on the lives of people in specific historical contexts. Leaders emerge at many levels of social life. They equally influence people in diverse ways. But what is common among all leaders is that they stand out from the crowd, always doing more than the ordinary person in an institution, community, movement, nation, and public spheres. Some leaders, as William Shakespeare once wrote, are born great. Some achieve greatness, while others have greatness thrust upon them. Some leaders, like Adolf Hitler and Osama bin Laden, did not obviously do any good to humankind. They could rightly be classified as bad leaders. But nonetheless, they inspired their followers and influenced social change in a negative way. Does not deprive them of being leaders. It only hangs on their neck the unfortunate epitaph of being bad leaders. In the decolonization period in Africa, which ended with the independence of most African countries in the 1960s, during my high school days, there were many challenges in the relationship between the colonizers, the British, and the colonized, the Africans. The British had created leaders among the colonized. These created leaders were used as handmaidens of colonialism. They were the local chiefs, administrators in the colonial civil service, the home guards, and the political hangers-on. They received many favors and privileges from the colonial state, and quite often were better to do in terms of wealth and powerful in terms of political positions. One could say these were the leaders who had greatness thrust upon them, since they had power from the colonial regime and not necessarily authority bestowed on them by the people. They imposed their will on the people. If truth be told, they were not really leaders, properly so called, because the people they were meant to lead did not follow them, but simply tolerated them for fear of reprisals from the colonial authorities. A good leader is not feared. He or she is respected. A good leader does not oppress. He or she inspires. Among the colonized Africans emerged rebels who detested this relationship of servitude and subjugation in which a thrust leadership mediated between the colonizers and the colonized. The argument sometimes goes that the contradictions created by the two world wars revealed the weak underbelly of colonialism, making the rebels bolder to demand freedom, civil liberties, and eventually political independence. The ideology of nationalism emerged in this context, as the bearers of this ideology were the nationalists, found not only in politics but also in different sectors of society, including religion and even in the colonial civil service itself. Hence, the leaders whose life stories are narrated in many books, biographies, and autobiographies, like Kwame Nkrumah, Patrice Lumumba, and Julius Nyerere, represented various strands of nationalism during the decolonization period in Africa. Likewise, even here in the United States of America, leaders of the civil rights movement, like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., emerged to challenge racism and the oppression of black people in this country at federal and state levels for many years. Some black people who styled themselves as community leaders were to be found in these governments, even the one led by Governor Wallace in Alabama in the 1960s and 70s. It is these hand-picked African-American leaders who were challenged by people like Martin Luther King Jr. under very difficult circumstances. Because of his courage, a dedication to serve fellow men and women, and to deliver from the oppression and discrimination, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had a lasting impact on American history, and not simply the history of African Americans. His life, his work, his vision, and his sacrifices were all game changers in the lives of many Americans. A good leader is one who inspires and makes a positive difference in people's lives. A great leader is one who inspires and makes a positive difference in the lives of whole nations and even the whole world, like Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, and I hope, hopefully, when finally leaves office and people look back nostalgically at his time in office, Barack Obama would perhaps be remembered as such a great leader. Some leaders are born great, argued Shakespeare. In many ways, Thomas Joseph Mboya, the firebrand Kenyan nationalist who was assassinated in the early age of 39 in 1969 in Nairobi, could be said to have been born great. An early achiever in almost everything he did, Tom Mboya inspired change and rose to the top of the nationalist movement in Kenya from a trade unionist background at the early age of 21. To be born great does not mean that an individual sits back and just becomes great by doing nothing. It is only in feudal society that mere parentage bestows one with recognition and awe in society. To be born great is akin to achieving greatness at a very early age due to extraordinary personal effort and positive impact in what one does within institutions, movements, and in society in general. But leaders are not superhuman individuals. They suffer the same frailties and can be let down by the same weaknesses as any other ordinary human being. In the Bible, Moses pleaded with God that he did not have the power to speak convincingly before his people. How could he possibly lead them in a liberation struggle against the powerful might of the Egyptian pharaohs and the Egyptian kingdom? But God urged Moses to have faith in himself, to believe in God, and to know that a more powerful force coming from God himself would inspire his leadership. Good leaders, therefore, need to have faith in themselves and in their power, always God-given, to inspire and to achieve. President Bill Clinton of the USA, while running the American government in the White House at a very difficult time in his presidency, gave in to the human weakness of having a relationship with a young woman, much as King David himself was attracted to the wife of Uriah at wartime, as narrated in the Old Testament. David sent Uriah away to war so that he could have the opportunity to seduce Uriah's wife. It was a calculated, wicked move, not befitting a leader like David. He took the risk of staking his reputation in the eyes of his people who adored and revered him, just because he wanted one woman, Uriah's wife. Clinton likewise almost lost his presidency as a result of his affair with Monica Lewinsky. During those difficult moments, his wife, Hillary Clinton, firmly stood by him as a forgiving and loving wife, no doubt demonstrating the qualities of a good leader in her own right. At a time like this, that ability to endure trying times must come handy to Hillary as she battles her way into the presidency of the US against a man who is as alien to decent behavior as our sins are alien to hell. These two stories illustrate the importance of the values of self-discipline in leadership, given the tremendous temptation to enjoy life as some insignificant individuals may do. A former student of mine, Marjorie Kabuya, has just published a book entitled Our Values, Our Destiny, a conversation on values in Kenya, in which she confronts the crisis of a value deficit in Kenyan society today, emphasizing the key role that good leaders ought to play from the family to the nation in instilling good values in daily life and in the management of public affairs. Marjorie discusses the values of peace, love, respect, honesty, integrity, tolerance, compassion, humility, responsibility, freedom, justice, and unity, and shows how interdependent all these values are in the making of good leadership. It is also noteworthy that as leaders succeed in life and become even greater, respected, and at times even glorified by the people they lead, they can attract tremendous resentment from some of their followers or lieutenants who would like to be like them. Tom Mboya was assassinated in broad daylight in a Nairobi street one day in July 1969, to be exact, July 5th. He was a good friend of the Kennedy brothers, John Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy, both of whom were also assassinated in the 1960s. John as a sitting president for the Democratic Party, from the Democratic Party, and Bobby as a presidential candidate on the Democratic Party ticket. Tom Mboya could have been assassinated as a result of colleagues who felt he stole the thunder from them, or those who were insecure about the possibility that he could eventually succeed Jomo Kenyatta as Kenya's second president due to his unquestionable leadership qualities. In the play Julius Caesar, Shakespeare demonstrates how such jealousy and peer rivalry can put to a tragic end the career of some very illustrious leader. One of the conspirators against Julius Caesar expresses this peer rivalry very graphically when he says of Caesar, and I quote, "Why, man, He doth betray the narrow world like a colossus, and we petty men walk under his huge legs and peep about. Brutus and Caesar, what should be in that Caesar? Why should that name be sounded more than yours? Now in the names of all gods at once, upon what meat does this Caesar feed, that he is grown so great? Yet it is also the case that although leaders may emerge and perform great deeds under humble circumstances, and although circumstances can also conspire to create an environment in which leaders perform beyond their own expectations, the people they serve may bestow them with even greater powers and achievements than they ever expected. M.J. Akbar, writing about the making of India under the leadership of Prime Minister Jawaharlal Pandit Nehru, says the following, and I quote, "Gandhi made Nehru Prime Minister of India in 1947. The people of India endorsed the decision in the general elections of 1942. In 1955, the cabinet awarded Nehru the highest honor possible in India, the Bharat Ratna, the jewel of India. And by 1957, some Indians were seriously discussing the possibility that Jawaharlal Pandit Nehru was a prophet, the reincarnation of a yogi blessed with miraculous powers." That kind of speculation among ordinary Indians may not be surprising, since Nehru was indeed an inspiring and visionary leader. But the adulation of a leader can also spoil him, making him believe he is more than human and can get away with all manner of preposterous deeds, provided people prostrate themselves before him. When that happens, such a person ceases to be a leader and becomes a demigod or a demagogue. A monstrous demigod always ends up in disgrace, like Muammar Gaddafi of Libya, or the melancholy trapped King Richard II in Shakespeare's play Richard II. And in this lies the difference between leaders who inspire their followers and rise to greatness as a result of their positive impact on society, and leaders who simply puddle along, making little difference in the future of societies or institutions they lead. When he was president of the United Republic of Tanzania, Mwalimu Julius Nyerere once said that the Tanzanian constitution gave him so much power that were he to implement that constitution to the letter, he would become the worst dictator Africa ever saw. But he decided not to do so. He decided not to use all those powers in the Constitution because he was much more committed to nurturing democracy slowly in Tanzania and not exploiting the powers given to the presidency in the Constitution to become a dictator. Occupying a position of responsibility may not bring out the quality of leadership in an individual, but an individual with leadership qualities makes a difference in terms of how he understands the meaning to society of the position he occupies and the impact on society of the position he occupies. Thus, the position of the presidency may always be there for various people to occupy from one election to the other. But the manner in which that position is used for good or bad may then depend on the leadership qualities of the respective individuals elected to that position. Are they men and women with vision? Do they have the courage of their convictions? What ideas do they bring forth to leave the world a better place than they found it? As you go through Stetson University, you students, and eventually go forth into the world, you must have some expectations of yourselves, something you are going to do or to become. Set your goals high and focus on your star in the distant sky. Don't lower your rudder below the nearest horizon, but aim high to fly with the eagles. That is what leadership is all about, in whatever you will be doing, wherever you will be, and whatever you will become. Go into the world to support the weak, uplift the afflicted, and give courage to the dismayed. You have a calling in life. That calling may not be easy to discern at the moment, but you need to believe it is there and have faith in God that you have what it takes to fulfill the best of your dreams. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Senator Nyong'o. We have a little bit of time for questions. 2 microphones are going to be floating around the hall for anyone interested in asking the senator any questions.
Senator Nyong'o, did growing up under colonial rule inspire you to get involved in politics? And if it did, how did it shape your belief system?
Yes, growing up in colonial Kenya did make me angry about colonial rule to begin with. I'll tell you a story. In 1956, that's the first time I went to Nairobi, which is our capital city. My father had been asked or transferred by the Anglican Church. He was a pastor in the Anglican Church, to go and minister to soldiers who were fighting the Mau Mau movement in Nanyuki, which is the heartland of the Mau Mau. That was in 1953. So we had to stay at home with my mother and go to a day school 5 kilometers away, walking every day. But anyway, in 1956, the Mau Mau was now coming to an end, and he was transferred to Nairobi, to a service camp, where he was now ministering to drivers, clerks, lawyers, and all that, accountants, people who were servicing the army. One day, there was a shop not too far from our house, where father usually bought provisions from the family. But that day I was sent. I was hardly about 8 years old. And I was sent to go and buy bread. And there was a special bread called Elliot's bread. So kind of a quality bread. So I went with money to buy the bread. And the Asian lady who was selling the shop could not believe that an African boy could buy Elliot's bread. So she was smoking a cigarette and took the burnt end of the cigarette and burnt my forehead and told me to go away. I was so bitter when I went to the house and told my father. Of course, my father was very angry. And my father knew that had he gone there, nothing like that would happen. So what my father did was to put on his army uniform. He was a regimental sergeant major in the army. So he put on his army uniform with his hat, took me along to the shop. And of course, when we got to the shop, the Asian lady and her husband was scared like nobody's business because authority had arrived. So they tried to excuse themselves, but my father just bought the bread and told them to behave themselves. That incident stayed with me all my life. The discrimination, this spitefulness of colonial rule. So of course, when we became independent, and we were now independent, the idea that we could run our society much better than a colonial society lived with me to the end. That could tell the story of why. That's single incident, or why I became so concerned about justice and fairness in society and fighting against all forms of discrimination.
Senator, you spoke about various artists as leaders and quoted heavily from Shakespeare and things like that. What role do you think art and artists have to play in fomenting political and social change?
I think artists are very important in political and social change. I mean, in this society, what has always impressed me or have an impact on me right from high school is just the role of artists as musicians or actors, the kind of message they pass through. I mean, I was an avid reader of Maya Angelou, and I listened to Billie Holiday's music all the time. The rendering of the suffering of people, I mean, they tell the stories of injustice in society better than everybody else, because you don't need to have to sit down and read, but you listen and enjoy, and the message sinks. I think that's the importance of art. Even when artists draw things and then you look at it and it is interpreted to you and the message sinks. I think that the idea of communication, of turning your mind around, or making you to see the other side of what you expect is reality. I think that's what art, music is all about, is that it awakens you, rudely awakens you from your comfort zone, your false assumptions. It reminds you that another world is possible. And I think if you look at a lot of music in this society, take for example, I mean, I don't know how many of you have seen the film 12 Years a Slave. I mean, if you see it and you hear the music that the slaves are singing, it tells their story and tells you how unpredictable life can become. Somebody who was a freed slave, then go back into slavery 13 years. He looks back and is determined to get back his freedom because he got an experience which was very unpredictable. You could never tell. So these reassurances that another life is possible is very present in movies, in music, and so on. That is not to say that all music and movies are that way. I'm going to talk about art and music, which is geared towards social change, towards inspiring people to build a better world.
Thank you so much for your talk, and thank you to both you and your wife for visiting us at Stetson. We're really delighted to have you. Peter War at the Ashesi University in Ghana is really dedicated to this idea that leaders are not born, but that you have to develop them. Are there similar ideas brewing in Kenya?
Yeah, you know that, yeah, I agree. It's not just in Ghana, but you remember there's a school that was established in South Africa, the African Leadership Academy, which picks up students from high school, from 4, takes them to their leadership academy for their A-levels so that they are trained, and they get into various colleges around the world. Yes, the idea of nurturing leaders in educational institutions like this one is growing. But what is interesting is that it was there before. I gave you the history of my high school. The Alliance High School was established as Alliance of Missions. All the Christian missions came together and decided to establish a school which would prepare leaders for the new Kenya, when Kenya becomes independent. And it was not surprising that at independence, about 3/4 of cabinet ministers in Jomo Kenyatta's first government were former students of Alliance High School. It was not a coincidence, because that has changed as more educational facilities have come up. But a time has come with what Marjorie Kabuya, my student who wrote that book, calls a value deficit. You know, our societies after independence with mushrooming of bad leaders at the national level and the passing of bad values, people now are much more conscious that if we don't do something about values and leadership, we may never get the change we need. A recent opinion poll taken in Kenya was very frightening. Young people between the age of 15 and 35 were asked if they had the opportunity to give a bribe to get service, would you do it? 45% said yes, they would. Then they were asked, who do you admire most? The kind of politician who has crooked his way through life, i.e. corrupt, bought office and so on. Do you admire that kind of person? Another 45% said yes. Which means that if we don't do something about what young people regard as success, we are building a society which can easily accept corruption as a normal norm in life. So the idea of dealing with values and nurturing good leadership is important. You can't take it for granted. So what he's doing in Ghana is commendable. And I would say that in many more African countries, that is recognized as a necessity.
Thank you again for coming today and talking to our students. I have the pleasure of working with these young minds every day, including your son. So thank you for your leadership as a parent. You did a good job. He's a great leader on this campus. I wondered your opinion or advice to especially youth. You mentioned it a little bit, but it can be a depressing time to live in this world and to live in America. We recognize, many of us, that there are deep issues of injustice and inequality within our systems of education, policing, healthcare, every system we can think of, and daily we see injustice on the news and in our streets and in our families. And I work with these students who want to be future social justice leaders, and one thing I want to work with them on is keeping them inspired and hopeful. How do you do that in your work? How do you stay inspired and hopeful and not just get tired by the battle that we have ahead of us? What would you advise for our students in that way?
I live two lives which can be contradictory. One as a politician, the other one as a part-time university teacher. When I'm teaching at the University of Nairobi now, I realize how things have changed. When I taught there in the 70s and 80s, students were much more determined to learn. They were idealistic. They read, they did their homework honestly, and they chased you into your office to pursue a question and discuss. And they were really passionate about learning and learning properly. Now, students Google. And I was very surprised. I gave my students an assignment. They all went and Googled and wrote the same essay. I said, this is not possible. I mean, you are not learning anything if you cannot write the same essay. So I just realized the casualness with which the students were taking learning, which is extreme. I don't think that would happen here. It's extreme. Now, why am I saying that? I'm saying that because the question you are asking me really depends on the commitment of both the teachers and the students. It is a meeting of the minds. I believe that students come here hungering to learn, and they don't actually know what they are going to be like after 4 years, but the teachers have to mold them and get something out of them which is there and they don't know it. At least this is what I experienced when I was an undergraduate, that finally the teachers ignited something in me which I never knew existed. You see what I mean? And it is for the teacher to get that thing out of the student. I find it extremely retrogressive, teachers who put the students down You all the time remind them of how stupid they are, or you are an idiot. I mean, student does not come here to be told he's an idiot. Student comes here to be told that, yes, you may be an idiot, yes, but I won't tell you that. I will somehow get you from that idiocy without you knowing it. I mean, I think it's a much comfortable zone to be in as a student. If after learning, then you look back and say, yes, I think a couple of years ago I was an idiot, I didn't know it. But for somebody to tell you before learning that you're an idiot, you will never learn. So I guess that's my experience and as a teacher, when I was teaching at the university, that's what I tried to get my students. You know, again, I don't know where we were talking with some people, I think at the law school, and somebody said that teaching is like acting. They're very close. They're very close. Teaching is like acting. Also, doing legal work in a court is also like acting. So an actor is somebody who makes people laugh, entertains them, inspires them, and so on. So you must do that. Entertain them and inspire them. I think so. Have I answered your question? Anyway, it was difficult, but I tried. I may have got A- or something like that.